Hello and welcome to Chakra News. Now, after 250 days at sea, the American aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, is facing food shortages, issues with plumbing, and exhausted sailors who would much rather jump aboard. Then, the IAF is gearing up for a massive fleet overhaul with plans for acquisition of over 114 Rafales, 60 multi-role transport aircraft, and a huge number of advanced jet trainers. And lastly, the Netflix series Saga. Now, based on the heroics of the number 17 Squadron, the Golden Arrows, the series has received rave reviews. However, it's also faced criticism on some fronts due to perceived inaccuracies. Now, to unpack all this and more, we've got with us the editor, Chakra News, Sandeep Unnithan. Sandeep, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Deepak.
Let's begin with what's happening in West Asia, and in this case, with the American aircraft carrier.
Yeah. The USS Abraham Lincoln that's been deployed continuously for 5 months. So this war, everyone thought was going to be a short war. It would get over on the 28th of February with a massive bombing. It didn't happen. Poor planning. They didn't have clear strategic objectives beyond just the immediate decapitation, which they thought would result in a regime collapse. Well, the regime is still intact. How many might have died, but you have hardliners who have taken over, and you can argue that the regime is more unified today than it was in the past. But the point is that the US has had to move aircraft carriers in from wherever they were, all across from the United States, from other conflict theaters like in Venezuela, and the aircraft carrier that you're referring to is the USS Abraham Lincoln, which has been at sea for over 200 days. Now, what they say about nuclear powered platforms like ballistic missile submarines and aircraft carriers is that they have unlimited endurance, right? That's one big problem that they've solved when they went in for nuclear propulsion, whether it's SSBNs or CVNs, nuclear powered aircraft carriers. But the caveat is that platforms like this are limited by the endurance of their crew and food supplies. That's a very important caveat that comes in descriptions of these class of vessels. And now you're seeing it for the first time with the kind of deployments that the US has been undertaking with its nuclear-powered carrier fleet, the Nimitz class. The Abraham Lincoln is a Nimitz class aircraft carrier. It displaces close to 100,000 tons. It has 5,000 crew, and those crew are facing the mental pressures, the mental and physical pressures of sustained deployments of over 6 months. So that is where we are at, where there have been reports. The Guardian has reported that crewmen have tried to jump overboard, literally. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we haven't seen in a very long time. But bear in mind, Deepak, that these carriers have been designed for such extended deployments, 5 months, 6 months, which is why they're nuclear powered. They're big ships. They're like floating cities. They're floating cities with air bases on top. But these are unprecedented times. Now, when the US picks multiple conflicts across the world, they have a West Asia conflict. Before that, they had a Venezuelan theater. They have 11 aircraft carriers, these super carriers as they're called. They're all powered, they're all run by humans, men and women behind the machine. And it begins to take a toll, especially when you deploy them constantly. You move them from one conflict theater to the other when you've got multiple commitments. And that's what we are seeing clearly. There's a mental and a physical breakdown among the crew. Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has been confronted with that. He, of course, brushes it aside, saying that, it's just fake news and all of that. But there's a serious problem. The US is looking at a very, very serious problem, because if these deployments continue, mental and physical breakdown leads to a loss of morale, and word like this spreads like wildfire. Possibly, this generation is not accustomed to the kind of deployments that they once did, where their fathers and their grandfathers did during the Second World War,
right,
or even during the Vietnam War. And one reason, of course, like I mentioned, is that propulsion systems have become so good now. Nuclear-powered reactors, for instance. The vessels can stay out at sea almost indefinitely, but they're run by humans, and that is where they're facing a serious crisis. So the US has, of course, rushed in another aircraft carrier to replace the Abraham Lincoln, but this is going to be a serious problem for them, in the months ahead, because US strategy, and not just naval strategy, US warfighting strategy revolves around aircraft carriers. And all of these aircraft carriers have seen short deployments in the recent times with port calls and all that. But when you're looking at sustained deployments, when you're fighting wars of attrition, for instance, there is a mental and a physical toll. There is a human toll to be paid. And that's what we are seeing here with the USS Abraham Lincoln.
You mentioned that there was a lack of clear objectives, but could we extend that argument to say that, there was also poor planning? Because there must be a supply chain to, reach out to this.
So, without doubt, the Iran war is, I've been saying this on television from the very beginning. I call this a stupid war. I mean, the aims, objectives of this were so poorly defined that today it's Iran that has the upper hand. They're dictating terms. They know that. And President Trump is being led into what I have described a Carter trap, which is what his predecessor from 1979, the American president during the Iran crisis, the Islamic Revolution of 1979, went through, where the Iranians, the Islamic regime took over in 1979. They held more than 50 US people hostage. It was called the famous hostage crisis, which, believe it or not, lasted for 444 days. That literally bled the Carter administration dry. President Carter never recovered from that blow, and the Iranians appear to be planning a similar blow for President Trump, who's looking at the midterms now. So he has, as they say, trouble, they come in battalions, and that's what seems to be happening here. You have trouble here, you have these little sparks of discontent, you have a midterm poll that's coming up. It's not a very popular war. The president's own ratings are on the downslide. And these are all canaries in the coal mine.
Moving on to our second story, Safed Sagar. Now, this series has received rave reviews for an accurate portrayal of what the Indian Air Force is really like. And incidentally, it's been ranked #1, not just on Indian Netflix, but also in Pakistan. I think #2 in Pakistan.
#2 in Pakistan, but across the board. I must confess, Deepak, I haven't seen the series. You've seen it. You described it to me. I know the makers of the series, and there are, a bunch of wonderful people. I've known them throughout the time that they were making it there. I've had the, opportunity of seeing certain, rushes of that, stills. And what struck me about that was their attention to detail. And they're very good, production team there. There's Kushal Srivastava, who's the showrunner, ex-Air Force guy himself, who was inspired, incidentally. He told me he was inspired to join the Air Force because of Safed Sagar. And so Kushal and his team, they've done a good job. They've, stuck close to the original story. It's a documentary kind of thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is that the sense that you got as well?
No. I mean, while they've gone to great pains to, maintain accuracy, it's more of a web series with a rather stellar cast who've done a wonderful performance.
It's a web series. What, 6 episodes?
6, 7. Actually, I just binge watched all of them, so I don't quite remember that.
If you binge watched an Indian OTT series, it means it's good.
Yeah.
But, coming back to this now, they've done a lot of, good research. They have described the character of Pervez Musharraf. My first question to the team was that, how have you depicted Pervez Musharraf and Nawaz Sharif? And it turns out that they've been described rather well. They've been played by very good actors. Musharraf has rarely been seen on Indian, cinema or in Indian OTT, despite the fact that he is a larger-than-life personality of the 21st century. He's done some pretty horrible things, including launching the Kargil War. But coming back to the series, why members of the Air Force have an issue with that is because we just spoke with Air Marshal Narendeshwar Tiwari, who was the Vice Chief of Air Staff, and of course he was the Chief Test Pilot of the AST, which actually did a lot of the legwork for integrating the lightning pods with laser-guided bombs during Safed Sagar. Now, his point was that, they took away from the main story, which was the story of the Mirage 2000s doing the bombings of the Monto Dhalo and Tiger Hill. Those were turning points in the Kargil War, because when the dumps at Monto Dhalo, which was basically the logistics supply nodes of the Pakistan Northern Light Infantry, which had captured the Kargil heights, Once those dumps were hit, their supply lines were severed, and that was the end of their deployment. And from then on, it was downhill for the Northern Light Infantry. Now, his point is that they did such a lot. They were close to. Now, the first point that he has is that he was getting a lot of feedback after the series that why were the LGBs not ready? Why were the Mirages not shown? And it appeared that the Mirages didn't have a role in this. And he's a very proud Mirage pilot. He's done such a lot in Safed Saga. So I think he was a bit disappointed about what was actually shown on Operation Safed Saga. Now, to give you another perspective, when I asked the filmmakers this, they told me that this story was not actually an overarching Operation Safed Saga story.
It was more about just the Golden Arrows.
It was just the number 17 Golden Arrows Squadron, which was led then by Tony Dhanua, who later became Air Chief Marshal Dhanua, the former Air Chief. Now, it was a story of one squadron that had gone into action, which had lost a pilot, which was a reconnaissance mission that he was flying. And then they kind of came back into the war, literally, throwing bombs at the Pakistanis. They converted the Rakeh squadron into an attack squadron. So it was basically a story of just that one squadron. Now, the Air Force insisted that the series be called Safed Saga, which was the overarching Air Force term for the entire operation, which began on the 26th of May, 1999. So when you look at it, you look at a series called Safed Saga, you expect it to talk about all the Air Force contribution in that war. Right. And so I'm sure a lot of Mirage pilots, the Battle Axes and Tigers who saw it, were justifiably disappointed that, look, we did such a lot of heavy lifting. None of that is on screen in Safed Saga. This is a story of the Golden Arrows, but that's a fact. Now, there's a silver lining to this cloud of controversy, which is that the series has done extremely well. And if you were to binge watch a series, I can say that again, if Deepak Badana has to binge watch an Indian OTT series, it's got to be really good, right? And I promise to watch it this weekend, Independence Day. Now, the good news is that the makers believe that there is meat in this for a second season. So you're possibly going to see the Mirage 2000s coming in. And I believe you were telling me that there's a lead into the next
The story
season.
ends with the Battle Axes ready to do their part.
Right.
And I'm not sure, but there's maybe a shot of the Mirages going into the air, one at least. So there's ample scope and opportunity for a follow-up. And I believe the audiences will demand one.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And so there you go. And I really hope that they focus on Air Marshal Narmadeshwar Tiwari's role, him and his men, the small group of Air Force people who made that high altitude bombing possible. This is a remarkable operation. You have to give it to the Indian Air Force. The Pakistanis, the Pakistan Army, Musharraf and co, they launched this operation thinking that the Indian Air Force would never dare attack those posts.
It was impossible to do that.
It's impossible. It is literally at the roof of the world. The posts are between 12,000 and 15,000 feet.
This one, I think, was somewhere closer to 16 to 18,000 feet.
Which one? Tiger Hill?
According to the series.
All these posts were above 12,000 feet, right? Extreme high altitudes. These posts were given Stinger missiles, Manpads, Stingers and Anzas. And they were asked to fire and hit heavy machine guns as well. Now, the idea is that when the Air Force comes in to bomb, they start launching Manpads at them, which means that they will have to then, start bombing from a standoff distance. And when you go fly higher, it means your bombs aren't that accurate. So that's why what Air Marshal Tiwari and his men did is so significant, that you could bomb, you could do standoff bombing, you could knock out Tiger Hill, you could knock out the positions in Muntadur, all of that. So, I'm hoping that there is a second season for this because, like I said, there's so much meat in that story.
Our last story for this week is again to do with the IAF.
Yes.
So the IAF appears to be undergoing, a transformation, and they've got plans to get advanced jet trainers. They've got plans for multi-role transport aircraft, and of course, 114 Rafales.
Yeah, there's a lot of money that's going to be put down on the table by the government of India for at least 3 programs of the Indian Air Force. The first one, of course, is the Rafale acquisition, where Dassault, which is the French fighter jet manufacturer, they've submitted a bid a techno-commercial bid to the government, which is believed to be around $38 billion. It's a very large deal. It's possibly one of the largest fighter acquisitions in the world at the moment. Now, this is for 114 aircraft, Dassault Rafale aircraft, and these will come in over the next couple of years. Um, uh, 18 of them are in a flyaway condition, and the rest of them are to be built in India with a local partner, with an Indian defense partner. So that's the big one. That's the big fish. It's been in the pipeline for many, many years. It was, if you recall, it was called the MMRCA at one point.
Right.
It was 126 aircraft, which then collapsed into a 36 aircraft off-the-shelf purchase. And then because of the Air Force not getting the numbers that it needed in the last decade, that's now gone back up to 114 aircraft. And that is going to happen very soon, we are told. It's a big deal. The second deal that the Air Force wants is the medium transport aircraft requirement, the MTA. Now, that's for the replacement of the AN-32
Right. The
transport
Russian
aircraft, the
AN-32.
Russian AN-32s. We got about 100 and 120 odd of AN-32s in the 80s. These have literally reached the end of their lives, and these will be replaced by about 60 MTA aircraft, which 60 to 100. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but it's rough. It's almost a 1:1 replacement for the AN-32, and of course, like the it's the same template as the Rafale, that you're going to have a domestic partner. The winning consortium will get the bid. It's an Indian company with a foreign partner. In this case, there are two front runners. One is Mahindra and Mahindra with Embraer, the Brazilian makers. You have Tata Advanced Systems with Lockheed Martin, which makes the C-130. So the Air Force is looking at a medium transport aircraft which can carry something between 18 to 30 tons. And you're looking at an aircraft which comes in between the C-295 and the C-17. So it's
Right.
a medium transport aircraft kind of thing. So that's what they're planning to buy over the next decade. These will start coming in. The Air Force has, of course, got its C-295s, but here there are two front runners. The C-130, of course, is one of the front runners. The Brazilians are also there with their
Embraers.
offering the Embraer, the transport version, a jet-powered transport version. That's what they're offering. And the third deal for which the Air Force has issued an RFI, it's a request for information, is for the trainer aircraft.
Right.
Now, those are the replacements for the Hawk advanced jet trainer. It's a stage 3 trainer. As you know, trainers have 3 stages. The first stage is basic, then you have the intermediate, and then you finally have the advanced jet trainer. Now, these are replacements for the Hawk, BAE Hawk that India acquired more than 2 decades ago. They started coming in actually about 2008, and they will be in service for another decade or so. So the idea is that you will put out an RFP by about 2027, and you will get this stage 3 fighter possibly in the mid 2030s. And the model is again the same. It's an Indian consortium in partnership with a foreign OEM. There are about 3, if I recall correctly, there are 3 contenders. One is, of course, the Italians. The Leonardo's got a fighter trainer, the Master. It's called the Master. The Koreans are there with the T-50 Golden Eagle, and interestingly, HAL is there in the reckoning as well with the HFT-42, which is a fighter trainer, which is what they positioned it as. That's still a concept. I've seen the model at Aero India about 3 years back. But the problem with that again is that they've yet to decide on an engine for that. Now, you have about a decade to launch that aircraft program, and this is the problem with a lot of our programs, that we've not been able to get the engine. And if you look at it, when I heard MTA and this new RFP, I was remembering what we did with the MTA, which was supposed to be an Indo-Russian joint venture for precisely this requirement, to replace the AN-32s. And that didn't take off. It was put in cold storage about a decade ago, if I remember correctly, again, 2016. This was meant to be a joint development for a new platform that India and Russia will co-develop, but that didn't take off. And so we are here back at the starting block with these platforms that are already in service. Now, the advantage of that Russian collaboration would have been that we would have got our own aircraft, developed from scratch, clean sheet design and all that. But now we have to go in for like a halfway house. We have to look at a platform that's already around for many years. The C-130, for instance, it's been around for many years. The trainers also are something that we should have kind of pushed hard on. Like, it's these are all known knowns. You would know that at a certain point, the Air Force will start getting rid of its, medium. The AN-32s will fly out.
Right.
The IL-76 is also going to fly out. That's another big hole in the Air Force's transport capabilities. So all of these have to be catered to. And again, back to the original point that I've been making is that we need to get multiple engine programs going, because till the time you don't have those engine programs going, all you're building is, literally the shell of an aircraft.
The airframes and nothing else.
The airframes. That's all. You're just making the airframes, probably some of the electronics and the displays, but the heart of the aircraft, which is the engine, is coming from abroad. But hopefully, given the fact that now you have a private sector also competition for the first time, that's rolling out, complete aircraft like the C-295. Though only as a junior partner, you would probably in the years ahead see a very strong private sector production line as well, which is what the government's strategy seems to be.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Sandeep. For our audience, I'll begin with wishing you a very happy Independence Day. That's all we have for you now. We'll be back again with some more exciting stories next week. Until then, stay tuned to Chakra News.
Jai Hind and Jai Bharat.
Jai Hind and Jai Bharat.